it's right to make those comparisons. It's completely different. And the Prime Minister said yesterday, I think almost in the same breath, talked about the diverse country that we are and that being part of our strength.
I'm not saying it is Enoch Powell. I'm saying, did he know? Yeah. Did his speechwriters know? Did you know that he was echoing Enoch Powell? And are you uncomfortable with it?
You know, everybody always gets caught up in focusing on different phrases and so on, but we do have to be talking about the
Labour audacious Gaza credit gab. If you're new here and you care about what's actually happening in British politics rather than the sanitized version they feed us, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we uncover. Let's get into it. There's a particular art to political opportunism, a delicate dance between appearing statesmanlike while simultaneously reaching into someone else's pocket and insisting you help pay for dinner. This week, our friends in the Labour government have performed this routine with a kind of theatrical flair that would make a West End production look genuinely subtle. Picture this. Donald Trump, the man who many analysts said couldn't orchestrate a two-car funeral, actually did the unthinkable. He secured a Gaza ceasefire. Israel ratified the agreement. The guns have stopped. Hostages are coming home. Humanitarian aid is flowing in. By any reasonable measure, this is a genuinely significant geopolitical achievement. The kind of thing that reshapes entire regions and potentially saves countless lives. It's the sort of accomplishment that most world leaders spend their entire careers dreaming about and never achieve. And yet here we are, watching it unfold under Trump's watch. Now, one would think the British government might take a moment to acknowledge the complexity of Middle Eastern diplomacy, perhaps offer measured support for the ceasefire regardless of who brokered it, and get on with things. One would think that. But you see, that's not quite what happened, is it? Enter Yvette Cooper, our current Foreign Secretary. When the news broke that morning, and I mean the actual breaking news that the fighting had stopped, Cooper wasn't content to simply welcome the development. No. She and the wider Labour government apparatus decided that what this moment truly needed was for them to aggressively insert themselves into the narrative. They wanted credit. Not just any credit, mind you, but the kind of credit that suggests they were instrumental in bringing about this transformative peace deal. It's the political equivalent of showing up to someone's wedding in a white dress. But here's where it gets interesting, because the White House had rather different ideas about the British contribution to all of this. You see, just days earlier, the Starmer government had recognized Palestine as a state. Now, on the surface, this might seem like a principled diplomatic gesture, acknowledging Palestinian statehood. But the White House saw it differently. They characterized it not as meaningful diplomacy, but as an attempt to placate domestic UK campaigners. A gesture made for home consumption, not because it would actually move the needle on the conflict. In other words, Trump's team looked at what the UK government had done and essentially said, "You're doing this for your voters back home, not because it matters." The read was that this was performative politics. Full stop. Think about that for a moment. The US president's administration had just dismissed the British government's Middle East credentials before Labour even had the chance to crow about their involvement. It's like getting rejected from the club before you've even knocked on the door. But did this stop Yvette Cooper? Absolutely not. With a kind of conviction that suggests she hadn't actually heard what Washington had just said about them, Cooper doubled down. She insisted that European countries, and by extension Britain, will all be strongly playing their part in the Gaza peace process. It's a statement that technically says nothing specific while somehow implying everything. Will they? Sure. How? Well, we'll find out. Probably. Eventually. Maybe. Then Labour MP Emily Thornberry, chair of the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, really went for it. Speaking to Sky News, she suggested, and I want to be precise about the word suggested, because what she actually said was far more audacious. She suggested that the UK had been actively advising Trump, that the president has had sensible friends, chief among them Sir Keir Starmer. She said this, out loud. She then went further, claiming that Britain hadn't been able to get Netanyahu's ear, which, fair enough, probably true, but they have had the ear of Donald Trump. And that Trump's attitude to the Middle East had markedly changed over the last few months because he has had sensible friends. The implication being, obviously, that these sensible friends were British Labour politicians. That Sir Keir Starmer sitting down for a chat with Trump had fundamentally altered the American president's entire geopolitical strategy on the Middle East. Now, let me ask you something. Do you believe that? Do you genuinely believe that Keir Starmer convinced Donald Trump to pursue an entirely different Middle East policy? Because I'm going to be extraordinarily honest with you, the evidence of that particular theory is remarkably thin on the ground. What's actually happening here is textbook political theater. It's what happens when a government finds itself on the periphery of a major international development and decides that rather than accept that position, they'll simply rewrite the narrative. They'll claim influence they didn't have. They'll suggest advisory roles that didn't exist. They'll point to a former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, being named to Trump's Board of Peace as evidence of their relevance in the process, conveniently overlooking that Blair was appointed by Trump, not by Starmer, and certainly not at the behest of the current Labour government. Because that's the thing nobody's really talking about. Tony Blair's appointment to this international oversight body actually undermines Labour's claim to have influenced this process. Blair is a former PM from over 2 decades ago. Yes, he's British. Yes, he has international experience. But his inclusion in Trump's framework wasn't some gift from the current government to the current government. It was Trump's decision. Trump brought Blair in. Trump decided Britain, in the person of a former Labour Prime Minister, should have a seat at this particular table. What makes this whole situation genuinely fascinating is the desperation underlying it. Here's a Labour government that came to power on a wave of we're serious, we're grown up, we're back in business energy. And yet when faced with a major international diplomatic achievement they didn't orchestrate, they can't simply acknowledge it and move on. They have to claim involvement. They have to suggest influence. They have to insert themselves into the narrative. It speaks to something deeper about the current state of British politics, and particularly this Labour government's sense of place on the world stage. There's this anxiety, this need to be seen as central to proceedings, even when the proceedings have nothing to do with them. It's not sufficient to say, this is good news for the region, and we hope to contribute constructively going forward. No, it has to be, we influenced this, we advised, we had the ear of the American president. And the White House essentially told them, no, you didn't. Your Palestine recognition was performative. You're not the architects of this. You're observers at best. Yet still, Labour soldiers on. Yvette Cooper insists on strongly playing their part. Emily Thornberry suggests they were there all along, whispering sensible words into Trump's ear. It's strategy theatre masquerading as diplomacy. It's what happens when a government mistakes the ability to speak about international affairs with the ability to influence them. The actual substance, the ceasefire, the hostages, the aid, the peace process, that gets almost lost in the noise of who gets to claim credit. And that's perhaps the most damning thing about all of this. A genuine geopolitical development gets subsumed into domestic political point scoring. A moment that should be about the humanitarian implications gets reduced to which British politicians can look most statesmanlike on camera. This is British politics in 2025. Not the substance. The optics. Not the achievement. The credit. Not the future. The narrative. So here's what you need to understand. Next time you hear a British politician talking about their influence on the world stage, remember this moment. Remember Yvette Cooper trying to claim credit for Trump's ceasefire. Remember Emily Thornberry suggesting the Prime Minister had changed the American president's entire strategic outlook on the Middle East. Remember that the White House had to essentially tell them they were being ridiculous. And ask yourself, if they are this desperate to claim involvement in things they didn't actually orchestrate, what else are they claiming credit for? What other narratives are being rewritten right in front of us? Because if there's one thing British politics teaches you, it's that the best story doesn't always go to the best result. It goes to whoever tells it most convincingly. And Labour, right now, is telling this story with absolutely nothing to back it up except hope that you weren't paying close attention. That's UK politics. That's what we're dealing with. And that's exactly why you need to stay tuned to this channel. Because we're not going to let you miss it. Subscribe now, and make sure you never miss when our politicians try to rewrite history. We'll be here, holding them to account. See you on the next one.